Hello, everyone, and welcome to another series of Millennials Revealed. And on Millennials Revealed, our purpose is to inspire climates of inclusion and cultures of collaboration with the millennial generation and their generational counterparts. We also want to provide millennials with insight, information on how to pursue their dreams in the most effective way from other game changer millennials like Miss Jenna Atkinson, as well as from other thought leaders and business leaders across the world that have won the hearts and minds of millennials and understand how to provide them and prepare them and equip them to be successful in the things that they want to do. So that's the purpose of this blab. And tonight's topic is millennials and race relations. And the topic came about all of the conversation and the dialogue going on around the Oscars so white hashtag. And then even more specifically, a comment that was made by, what is her name? Stacey Dash, a comment that was made by Stacey Dash. You're familiar with all this that's going on, right, Jenna?
I am. I just saw the Saturday Night Live sketch this weekend. You see that one about the Oscars?
I did. I did.
I read the articles about the Stacey Dash comments, and I think it's all very interesting.
Okay, well, before we jump into this, I want to welcome all of our guests and all of our participants that are here in the chat room. And everyone, please feel free to join in the conversation. Type your questions, type your comments. And if you're bold enough, hit the hot button to join the hot seat and participate in the conversation if you have something that you want to say. All right. So I think we have another guest that's actually joining right now. Let's see who, what the wind has blown in on coming into the hot seat. Oh, well, look at that. Under Armour representative looks like.
You know who I endorse now. I wear it all. Under Armour, Nike, Adidas. Send it all my way.
Hey, look, this blab isn't for you to solicit more endorsements, young man. Mr. Chris Broussard, thank you very much for joining us this evening on the Millennials Revealed blab. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you, sir.
It's great to be on. Got about 30 minutes as I'm trying to watch this NBA game too, the Cavaliers and the Timberwolves, but it's a very important topic, so I'm glad to be here and share my views.
All right, well, I tell you what then, let's go ahead and jump right into it. I explained to everyone what Millennials Revealed blab is about. And Chris, we talked a little bit about Jenna, and Jenna, I'll let you introduce yourself in a second, but I want to get right into it with Chris because I know Chris a little differently than maybe a lot of the rest of the world knows Chris. Everyone knows Chris as an award-winning journalist for ESPN covering the NBA, but I happen to know Chris is a lot deeper than that in his knowledge and his concern for strengthening race relations in America. Like that's something that you're really passionate about, Chris. So why don't you do a brief introduction on yourself for those that are participating? Obviously they know, most of them will know the ESPN stuff. You can touch on that, but tell them a little bit about some of the things that you do that they don't know about.
Well, thanks for that introduction, True. And I'm very concerned about trying to bring about racial equality and justice in this country. I am African American, for those that might not be able to tell. I'm a little melanin challenged, but the African American nonetheless. I'm very passionate about that, in fact. And so one thing I've done, I started a men's movement called the King Movement, which is among many things. One of the things it wants to do is help African American and Latino men, really help all men, but particularly African American and Latino men, really enjoy a higher quality of life in every way, spiritually, financially, economically, educationally, academically, in terms of our relationships and things like that. So, and also we're very concerned about, as I said, racial reconciliation. So that's why I'm very excited to be on this blab for, the few minutes that we have.
Okay. All right. So, Chris, even in your job with covering the NBA on ESPN, you work with some of the most high profile millennials in the world, right? And you work with arguably one of the most diverse organizations in the world, being the NBA, right? And the most high profile millennials in the world being professional athletes, NBA players. How do you see, because the topic is millennials and race relations. So how do you see millennials addressing race relations differently than generations in the past?
Well, I think that the races are more integrated than really any generation in American history. Socially, they interact a lot more. So I think they're more familiar. I think, African American culture in terms of music, and obviously African Americans dominates the two of the major sports in this country, being basketball and football. And then musically, African Americans are very dominant in that, and even all of entertainment, comedy, movies, things like that. So because of that, I think a lot of whites are more familiar with African Americans in those respects.
Right.
But I think sometimes it can be, people can think, wow, you got all these top rappers, topping the charts, and you've got all these tremendous athletes, and they can think, even you have the president of the United States, and they can think that,
right,
what more do you want? It's all it's all just.
It's like, don't y'all have enough?
Yeah, exactly. And a strong people is not built off athletes and entertainers, and even a few politicians. When you look at the state of the African American community economically and educationally, in terms of educational opportunities, economic opportunities, we're way behind still.
Right.
In fact, in terms of wealth, African Americans are actually at the same spot that they were in terms of percentage of the country's wealth as they were in the 19th century. When we exited slavery in 1863. So in that regard, we have not progressed. So to me, that the three areas where we need to address, if we really want racial equality and justice, is economic empowerment for racial minorities, better educational opportunities, or more equal educational opportunities, and then justice. We've seen many things go on in the criminal justice system, and I'm not trying to indict all policemen or the whole system, but when you see so many unarmed Black men and even boys in some instances being shot dead, that's a problem. And that's indicative to me of some deep-rooted racial issues in that system. So I think those three areas need to be addressed for us to really get racial equity and justice. And I don't mean, I mean equality of opportunity. I don't mean just we got to have, as many Blacks as we do whites in this certain career field or position. If we're not deserving, that's fine. But we have to, if we're not deserving with equal opportunity, that's one thing. If we're not deserving because we really don't have the same opportunities, and then I think that's where the problem is.
Okay. Well, then let me ask you this. So that's a lot for millennials to take the charge and really,
because y'all up, man, millennials, come on up.
The millennial takeover is upon us, man. So everything that you laid out with, from an economic standpoint, from an educational standpoint, and establishing that equity, that is that's a lot to take on, and that's a heavy task. So, let me ask you this. So as we're talking about race relations, and you even reference racial reconciliation, we all heard the comments from Stacey Dash, and you guys know I work with and talk to a lot of millennials, and that comment has planted some seeds in the minds of millennials. Like, the millennials are very open and embrace diversity and seek cultural diversity, right? And they seek out diversity. So I've heard comments and questions from millennials saying, hey, well, maybe Stacey had a point, right? Like, if we want integration, why are in certain ways, in certain areas, are we still pursuing segregation? And she mentioned the Image Awards, the BET Awards, and so on, right? So what do you say, and I want to get you to chime in on this as well, Jenna, after I hear Chris's commentary. What do you say to millennial minds that are saying, hey, well, maybe Stacey does have a point. Make up your minds, Black America. What do you want? You want integration, or do you want segregation? And so what do you say to young, impressionable millennial minds that are saying, hey, you know what? Ms. Clueless has a point.
That's a no pun intended, or
no pun intended.
Well, I would say that having your own forms of cultural expression that doesn't have to go against integration. Obviously, African Americans, the overwhelming majority, want integration. But you can still have your own forms of cultural expression. The prime example are the Jewish people. They have their own schools. They have Hebrew schools. They have their own cultural organizations, things that are just for them, strictly for Jews. They have even a form of sporting games that the Maccabee games, I think it's called. And yet they're also fully integrated into society. So I think it's nothing wrong with African Americans having the BET Awards, NAACP Awards, the HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, and things of that nature, and still wanting to be integrated. I think when you're only 12 to 13% of the population, it's very wise to have your own forms of cultural expression, because just by sheer numbers, the mainstream society is not going to address all of the needs of your group. And that's fine. And again, that's why you have your own forms of expression. For example, if you didn't have historically Black colleges and universities, do you know how many Black presidents, college presidents, Black professors, Black football coaches and basketball coaches would be out of work? I wouldn't have jobs, and you can't say, oh, they could just coach at, historically white schools, which is what they are, when the number of, even though Black athletes dominate football in particular, there are very few African-American football coaches. And so thank God that you have the opportunities you have at HBCUs. And the same goes for faculty and other administrators. It's not anti-integration. It's just saying, you know what, we have to take care of African-American people because the mainstream is not meeting all of these needs. So you could say the same thing about a Black-owned radio station that hires, African-Americans in certain roles that they may not have, at least in big numbers, at a white-owned radio station, TV station, whatever you want to call it. So I just think Stacey Dash's comments are, they're not very well thought out, because it's even white Americans will admit that racism still exists, and we still have a good ways to go. There are many white Americans. So Stacey was speaking as if everything is hunky dory and there's no racial problems, and African Americans have all these doors open to them. And I don't believe that's the case. And even if it were the case, I just don't think that there's anything wrong with having forms of cultural expression. Personally, I'm not colorblind. I don't believe in the term colorblind. I know what people mean when they say, we should all be colorblind. I'm colorblind. I don't see color. Well, you should see color because a person's ethnicity and race is a part of who they are. It's not the bulk of who they are. It's not all of who they are. It's not the main point of who they are. But I am African American. A person is Asian American. A person is a white American. So if I have to act like I don't see your race to treat you equally and treat you with respect and as a friend or as a civilly, then I got a problem. If I have to act like, oh, you're not Asian, so now I can treat you equally, then I got a problem. So it's not about being colorblind. It's about recognizing the value of all human beings, regardless of their ethnicity, and understanding that I believe, God gave us variety in terms of ethnicities and things like that to enhance our experiences here as human beings. The unfortunate part is we've taken the differences and we've used them as reasons and excuses to discriminate against others. And so I think that's the problem.
Very, very well said. Very well said. Now, you referenced white Americans a couple of times in your commentary, and it just so happens the True Access and Millennials Revealed Blab is extremely resourceful, and we are prepared for moments like this. So we have a white American that is participating in tonight's Blab. Miss Jenna Atkinson, my assumption is you are a white American.
I am. I just got back from Jamaica, so I'm like extra tan, but yeah.
I was wondering. I was like, okay, you might just be like your sister, or I'm not sure.
yeah, just got back from the beaches, but that's great, and I'm glad to give my opinion. And even glancing at some of the comments on the side, maybe my comments won't be as widely accepted as some of the things Chris has said, but to maybe play the devil's advocate and just give some perspective. I by no means am speaking for all Caucasian people or all millennials, but just based on my experience. I mean, obviously I did see all this stuff about Stacey Dash and read the articles. And from my perspective, at first I was thinking, I think that stuff is pretty warranted. I mean, I think like Chris said earlier, this is a time in America where integration and diversity is being more widely accepted than ever. And I think that's great and perfect. And I think that's really important to the millennial generation is to continue that progress. But on the other hand, something that kind of sucks and is maybe holding some of that back is just sensitivity to things is so outrageously high. I mean, I can barely like look at someone without them being like, well, what did that look mean? Or what did that, blah, blah, blah. You're especially, and I feel like, as a white person, especially as a white man, which I'm not, but I feel like I kind of feel bad for white guys at this time, like in America, because it's like you can't do anything right. No matter what you say, someone's going to be pissed about it, or they take it the wrong way, or you meant it like this, and you could be totally innocent and not thinking of it in that way at all. And the stuff that Stacey Dash said, I can easily see how, white people, especially millennials, could be like, that's right. There's another, big example in the news. I'm sure you guys saw it, where there was a high school and they had the shirts where they respelled a letter, which is absolutely
the N word.
And it's absolutely terrible. And there's no way that should have been done or that should have happened at all. It's terrible. But then there's a bunch of comments and articles. What if it was a bunch of African American guys who did that? And then would it even
still spelled it with Nigga?
Exactly. And I get that it's totally different and totally separate, but it's just another example of that kind of double standard of things. So if you want to be super sensitive about everything and you want 100% inclusion and diversity and integration with everything, then it is really hard for white people to say, like, where am I supposed to land on this? Because I feel like no matter what I say, I'm not doing it right, or I'm not, even though I could be 100% for and am 100% for promoting diversity and progress and making everyone have equal opportunity. I feel like sometimes you can't win as a white person in a time like this where there's just so much sensitivity, and you still need to have, we want the BET Awards, but we want the Oscars to have more African-American candidates, but we don't want the white awards or like whatever. So I feel like it makes it a little confusing for people. Not that it isn't warranted, and that there, like you said, Chris, that there's a great reason behind why it's like that and why those things are available. I just think it makes it maybe confusing for people.
Chris, do you share in Jenna's sentiment? Do you feel bad for white males?
Okay, well, I don't. Come on.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far.
You guys, give me a break.
I know. I'm giving you a hard time,
Yeah,
Jenna. I know.
Let me say this though, in all seriousness, I thank Jenna for sharing honest opinions, because one thing I do feel is that it's difficult for white people to share their true feelings about race for fear of being called a racist. I mean, if you say something, you could say anything, and a lot of times it could be taken as racist. So when it's really not, just because you comment on race doesn't mean you're racist. So I thank Jenna for being honest. That took a lot of courage. I do agree with her sentiments about the sensitivity of society. I mean, it is quite ridiculous. I mean, you can't really say anything without it potentially being offensive to somebody and finding yourself on the hot seat. So I agree with her on that. I would say, and I do say this, I think most African Americans would agree with this, that we would gladly exchange places with white Americans to rid them of that quote unquote double standard. Because in some ways, you're right. African Americans can talk about race differently than white Americans for the most part. How many times? I mean, gosh, it seems like the majority of African American comics, right? Comedians, part of their shtick is to talk about white people and white people, like they'll mimic the way white people talk and be straight, like, and all that. And everybody's fine with it. Everybody's cool with it. But if you got a white person up there and they start acting like Tyrone and it'd be over. I mean, you be, and that is a double standard, but it's the double standard. It's similar to how women can talk about sexism or things like that differently and maybe more overtly than men, because it's understood that they have been oppressed in that area, and they haven't had the opportunities that men have had historically and even still today. So you're given that leeway to speak more about it. The same thing with African Americans. It's understood that we've historically been oppressed and still today to some degree. And so you're given that leeway to talk about it more. And that's what I mean. We would gladly switch positions and not have that leeway if we had quote unquote Black privilege, and so that's where I understand where Jenna's coming from. I think people are way too sensitive. And Chris, what it does is it hinders true dialogue. Like Jenna being honest, we can both be honest and share true opinions, and you really see how people feel. And I'm not going to think Jenna's a racist because of what she said. That enables us to have a true dialogue and understanding and hopefully get past some things. But if she was afraid to say what she really felt for fear of being labeled a racist, then we're not getting anywhere. Everybody's gonna say, "Oh yeah, everything's fine," and so I think that we have to be less sensitive so we can really truly talk about things and see how people feel. And you just can't be so quick to label everybody racist because they have certain views that aren't politically correct nowadays.
Right. Well, whoever just chimed in looks like they were doing some bench presses or push-ups, so they must really have something powerful to say as they enter the blab session.
Mr.
But
Pettigrew.
I will say this, and I see a question in the chat room, so I want to address that. But I also want to take a second to address something that you just said, Chris, in response to what Jenna was saying. And I agree, Jenna, and I applaud you for being open. And Jenna, I know you, so I'm not surprised that you were willing to have that openness and that courage to say what you really think and what you really believe. But Jenna, it's being willing to embrace that initial level of discomfort that may come with having an honest conversation and dialogue about race is going to be necessary for those that may feel uncomfortable or feel as though they're going to be accused of race. Like, because Chris touched on historically how African Americans have been oppressed. And I don't want to make this just about black and white, but that's what the Oscars is about. And that's what, the topic is about what Stacey Dash talked about. But until there's a level of comfort willing to accept that, okay, there's a risk involved in being perceived as racist, but we're going to have to get past that initial level of discomfort in order to get to some resolution. Because let's be clear, there is a reason that African Americans feel the need for an Image Awards, for BET Awards, for HBCUs, and all of those things. It's because of that, the being oppressed throughout history and needing a sense of identity, a sense of self, a sense of affirmation, because you're not seeing yourself in these institutions, in these organizations, in the media. So it's easy from a psychological standpoint to believe that you're not valued and you don't matter. So that's why these things have been created. And I think we have an HBCU alum that just joined in, and a conversation that Chris and I had prior to this is that we have to remember that HBCUs are just that. The H is historically. It is not exclusively. It is historically Black colleges and universities, because Blacks were not allowed to go to the PWIs, the predominantly white institutions. So those were created so that they can afford so they were afforded the opportunity for higher education. So, those are some of the things that exist, but it's this conversation, right, Jen, and this dialogue, and you saying, hey, let's talk about it, right? We need more of that so we can come to some level of understanding and to address Jason Crocker's, to some degree, question over there in the question section. How do we get from where we are to race, religion, sexuality not being an issue? Is that even possible? So, Mr. Beemore, you chimed in for a reason. I don't know if it's something that Chris or Jenna said, or you saw our friend Jason Crocker's question, but you have the floor, sir. What would you like to share with us?
Number one, thanks for broaching the subject. And I want to start with a question for you, True. And that is, as you're a part of you're Gen X, correct?
I am Gen X. I thought you said Jenna, but no, I am Gen X.
No, I apologize because I got on the show a little late, but I wanted to first ask a question and ask you how you see millennials changing the conversation regarding race, if at all. Is that something you already covered? I don't want to jump back in if you've already done that.
No, we have not, and I do have some thoughts on that. I see, and we have a resident millennial, so I am speaking as a quote unquote millennial empowerment expert, someone who seeks to empower millennials. But I'll share my thoughts, and Jen, I'd love your thoughts on this. But I see millennials addressing race relations in a unique way than boomers or Xers before them, because they truly embrace diversity. It's the most diverse generation in American history. And so because they truly embrace diversity and they're culturally curious, they are seeking it out, and they are not afraid, which I think Jenna is a perfect example of that, to have the conversation, because it's coming from a genuine place. Millennials don't want to seek out inclusion simply because they are checking a box. And I think when you talk to a lot of boomers, and I don't want to generalize, although I'm about to, a lot of boomers, they want to check a box. Millennials genuinely want to create climates of inclusion across the board, and they truly embrace diversity. So I think it's coming from a more genuine place. Fair, unfair, you guys can shoot me emails and throw, snowballs at my house later. But I think that's how millennials will move us forward. And reconciling or strengthening race relations. They're not afraid to talk about it. They're not afraid to address it because they genuinely want to make it better. It's not just checking a box for them. And thinking about millennials are the other generation. Like, when you got to fill out an application, it has African American, Hispanic, white, or other, right? Millennials are 65% more likely than their grandparents to be of a bicultural or biracial identity. So millennials as a generation are other. Like they don't they'll look at us like, I'm not that. I'm just going to check other. And so not only do they think outside the box, millennials live outside the box. And I mean that literally from the racial identity box. Millennials resent having to even fill in a racial identity box because they really and truly represent the true word of multicultural and multi-ethnic.
Are you saying that
your question?
Well, to some extent, yes. It was very high level. I guess just to jump in the conversation, it's my belief, and it's been widely documented, that in America and in the post-colonialist countries, white supremacy is the way of society. And that doesn't mean what a lot of people think it means. It just means, like, in places where people are darker complected, often they hold up people who are lighter complected. For example, India, Bollywood. You have a vast diversity and disparity in darker skinned, lighter skinned people, but most of the celebrities are lighter skinned people, and that's just an after effect of colonialism. It's just part of it. So to kind of throw it into sports for a second, and to kind of flash back to Jenna, what you were talking about. So, Chris, I've heard it said that Larry Bird would make a bad basketball coach, and guys like Larry Bird would make a bad
basketball coach.
Yes, and here's why it was said: because Larry could hit the three at will. Tough situation, double guarded, he hit a three. So the point was that it makes him to be maybe less of a coach because he might expect his player to be able to do the same thing. And maybe have less sympathy. Same way that they say C students sometimes make better business people than A students because they understand struggle. If you've never understood struggle, you may not be as flexible or pliable. And back to the white supremacy piece. In a white supremacy society, if you can always hit the three ball, if you're always the beneficiary, then you may not be as sensitive or really be able to understand not coming from that privileged position. And that's the part that I think we really could be talking about. And I think that's kind of where Stacey Dash kind of loses us a little bit, because I think maybe she's crossed into a space where she no longer can be sympathetic to those who aren't in the same position that she's in. It's tough. And I'm wondering if that's a real conversation.
Yeah, I think you made some interesting points. First of all, Larry Bird was a coach.
I know. Was he a good coach? Anybody?
I think he was a good. I think he was a pretty good coach.
He made the pace great. He followed Larry Brown and turned him into a great team. But your analogy was a poor one, but I know I know the point you were making, and it was a good point. Because they have said that about Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan, and
they would be bad coaches, right? Because they could do the incredible thing.
Bird just happened to be a pretty good one, but But I get what you're saying. Yeah, it's like, I'm a man. I don't think about sexism at all.
That's the point.
I mean, because I don't have to deal with it. Like a woman deals with it and thinks about it. So I'm sure a lot of whites don't think about race. Black people, man, at least every black person I know pretty much thinks about race all the time. I think about race all the time. Like, it's just, that's how we grew up. You didn't have the luxury of not thinking about race, because everywhere you went, race was going to be an issue. And in certain ways, that can be a hindrance to us, because we may see racism where it's not. But I think that's I think in most cases, it's not like that. And But I would just say that, you know, this notion that we're post-racial in America is far-fetched and not true. And the millennial generation, they socialize well across the races, but racial equality is not about socialization. It's not about having dinner together. It's not about, you know, playing basketball together or listening to the same music, because, you know, back in the 50s, white people were digging the Temptations. They were digging James Brown when he's saying, I'm black and I'm proud. They were, you know, they liked the black artists and musicians. Black people and white people have been having relationships, playing together as children, and having sexual relationships during slavery that was going on. So it's not about socializing and things like that. It's about economics, education, and justice. And there's still many studies that prove, that have been done by Ivy League professors, that when a black person say they have, you just see the resume and it's an African-American sounding name like Jamila or Jerome or, you know, something like that, that those people are less likely to get called in for an interview than a person with a name like Bob or Mike or something like that. They're just proving that, you know, African-Americans with the same educational level are making far less money than white Americans with the same educational level. The African-Americans, you know, I mean, we could go on and on, whether it's credit, trying to get a loan from a bank, whatever it may be. It's not like sports. We can't compare. You know, I've heard people compare, well, what if we had affirmative action in the NBA or in NFL? It's not the same, because most of corporate America is subjective, okay? Sports is not subjective. When you put two people in the boxing ring, when you put two people on the basketball court, it's pretty evident which one's better, which one's faster, which one's stronger, which one plays the game better. That's obvious to all. But corporate America is subjective. You might like my writing one way, but another person might feel a different way about it. Same thing. A lot of these jobs have management. They have trainee programs because they train you to do what you need to do. It's not that you come in knowing how to do it already. So it's not, if we left it to just say, you know what, let's get rid of all the HBCUs. Let's get rid of all the black owned businesses and anything dealing with race, then black people wouldn't be getting hired in a lot of these positions. A lot of times due to racism, sometimes due to familiarity. A white person may just feel more familiar, more comfortable with this other white person who may be, just say he's a little bit less qualified than the African-American, but both of them could do the job, you know, so I can go with this guy I'm a little more comfortable with because both of them can do it. And that type of stuff happens. So
those biases are real. Yeah, those biases exist.
Let me jump in.
Well, hold up, Jenna. Wait a minute, Jenna.
I gotta go after Jenna. I want to hear.
Okay, all right, and I'll lob this up to you, Jenna. I know you have something that you passionately want to get out, but from a generational standpoint, to Chris's point, the Jamals, the Joaquins, the Jimalitas, the Tashawn Denishas, like, is that a generational thing? Are the baby boomers the ones that have those biases, that are blocking those raises, promotions, and hiring practices? Would that be the same case if millennials were in those positions, in those decision-making positions, in your opinion?
You're asking Jenna, right?
I'm asking Jenna.
Me? Oh my
God. You're
God.
the millennial. Yes, you're the resident millennial. No, I'm asking you. So if here's my opinion
that will maybe get rid of your question, that again might not be the most popular one, but I've seen some real life examples of this. So I live in Wisconsin, Madison. Before I had my own business, I worked for several top 100 financial firms. Very white, old man. They called it old pale male culture. So it was like all these old white guys. If there was an applicant that was an African American, they were dying to get them on the staff. Even more so, I would say the opposite of what Chris said. And I'm sure there's plenty of examples.
That'd be a quota, though. That was probably a quota. Was 12% of their staff?
I think it
goes back to their management African American.
I think it goes back to what True said, that millennials more want diversity because they truly want inclusion and they want that diversity of opinions and they want that mix. For baby boomers, it's, yeah, maybe we need to check the box, but I think it's almost, there's been examples of reverse racism where at a recruiting fair, all the big accounting firms are trying to get the, 4 black guys in the room because we got to check that box. We need someone black on our staff. We need whatever. So I'm sure there's plenty of examples where, it's the other way around. And like you said, Chris, it's kind of holding people down. But I think there's plenty of examples the other way too. And it's whether, I think, going back to what True said, if millennials were in the more executive positions, the reasons that they would be reaching out and hiring and trying to get more diversity with the staff is more of a true, realistic reason than maybe why baby boomers do it now. But I think there's examples of both. I don't think that's always the case. I think if we had a pile of applications and Joaquin or whoever was on there, we'd be like, holy shit, get this guy in here because, we're old, pale male. We need something new in here. We need some diversity. So the background of why that would happen, I think, is different between baby boomers and millennials. But I don't know. I don't necessarily agree. I'm sure that you experience it completely different than I did, especially in Wisconsin.
And I think that's why these conversations are important, is to the educational component, about sharing that information and sharing that perspective, because my experience has been similar to Chris's, and I would imagine B. Moore's, and, if other African Americans, and the statistics and the data, research has shown that Jamal and Taquan and Malik statistically aren't getting those callbacks, and just based on the qualifications.
I just wanted to quickly, I need to go. I want to say thanks to everybody on the Blab. Jenna, great comments. Be More, True, and even all the people that send in questions and comments. Unfortunately, I need to go do a little work, but I appreciate the time and everybody checking in. I hope to do it again, True. Hopefully you'll invite me again.
Bird wasn't a great coach.
He was coach of the year. That's another discussion. You got to have a blab on that. I see some racism in that comment.
I love that, Bird. Coach, though.
All right, guys.
Hey, Chris, thanks so much, man. Have a good night.
Let me jump in for a second, True. And Jenna, let me say that your
opinion. We have another, just real quick, B-More. We have another seat open. Whoever wants to chime in and join in on the conversation, whoever's bold enough to hit that button and challenge whatever B-More is about to say.
Oh, come on.
Oh my God, it's Larry
Bird. How dare you? No. So Jenna's experience is real, and it's not even that unfamiliar, right? That's her experience, and I understand it. The thing that I think we're talking a little too late in the timeline of where the real issue is, and a lot of times the real issue doesn't start at that job interview, or I see some of the comments on the sideline, people talking about I just want the best ever. When we're talking about equal opportunity, we should be talking about equal opportunity for education, so that someone who comes from a neighborhood that is less financially sound, a worse neighborhood, the education should not fail them. Meaning, I shouldn't have to be able to afford a $700,000 house or private school to get my son or daughter the education he or she needs to be able to compete for that same job, no matter what his or her name is or whatever. By the time we get to the job opportunities, we want to be able to compete for the best opportunity and be the best candidate. If that's not happening, which I think we all agree is not happening, we've got a problem. And the real race issue that we should be tackling is not about what my experience is or what Jenna's experience is or True or David or Chris's. We should be talking about the systemic problems that still exist and maybe get involved in correcting those things. Those things that started way back with red line districting and real estate and choosing neighborhoods, that are going to be underserved as part of the system and kept over there so that these neighborhoods could be better served. Those things, we're still living that thing out. America's still a very young country. We're 2-3 generations out of a Holocaust,
Call me naive, but I have faith in the millennial generation. I believe that the millennial generation is the hero generation who has been purposed to put on their capes and save the world. And I believe
I'm charging you.
and I truly believe that. So call me naive, but because of the diversity that this generation has come up with, I think it is something that is innate within them to seek that out and seek it out from a genuine place and for genuine reasons. And when you really understand why you're doing a thing, it just gives where you're going more value, and it gives what you're doing more impact, and it gives how you do it more precision. So I think when it's coming from a place of genuineness, can I say that, David? You got your BS LMNOP PhD degree. When it comes from a place of genuineness, I think that it's going to yield the right results. All right. So I have a lot of faith in our millennial generation. I have a lot of faith in you guys, Jenna. So don't let me down.
You should. Here's one thing, True, that I think is really different and really going to help this issue because of how millennials just are as a group. And of course, this is a generalization, but if you read anything about how millennials are in corporate culture, and something that kind of upsets baby boomers and some people that are maybe at executive levels, is they aren't afraid to question the status quo. They aren't afraid to be bold, to be blunt. Kind of like you said earlier, some of the comments I made, I'm in a blab with 3 African-American guys, and I'll say what I think. I'll ask my questions, and I'm not afraid to say that. If you think I'm racist, well, I guess that's your opinion. I'm not. I don't try to be. I don't think that's who I am. But of course, people are perceived whatever way. And I think what's really important with millennials is when they see some of these differences or they see problems, like, I'm not afraid to call you up, True, and be like, hey, what the hell is going on with this, man? Like, I want to understand it better because I want to be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. I think a lot of baby boomers and people are older are like, oh man, everything is so sensitive now. I don't eat, like, I'm just stepping out. Like, I don't even want to be involved because I'm going to be put into whatever group. In Madison, I don't know if you guys saw, but a while back, there was one of those officer-involved shootings of an African-American kid. He was like 18 years old, and it was a big thing. And in the national news, and a lot of things were going on here with protests and riots. And there's a group that started called Young, Black, and Gifted. And it was 2 younger people that started that group, and were really starting to do a lot of different public demonstrations in Madison. And a lot of the news about it was negative in the way that they were going about things and their demands. And I'm thinking from my perspective as a millennial leader, and I'm the president of a young professionals group here in Madison, I'm thinking, man, I don't get why they're doing some of this stuff this way. This definitely isn't how I would go about trying to find the solution. So I picked up the phone and I called the 2 leaders of that group, Young, Black, and Gifted. And I'm like, dude, let me buy you lunch because I want to learn more about your perspective. Obviously, I have a different viewpoint. I'm a white chick. You're, obviously coming from a different standpoint. You view things differently. But I, like you said, True, I genuinely want to find out why you're coming at it that way, how I can help be a part of the solution, and ask those questions. If you think in the beginning, right, I'm totally crazy and whatever, that's fine. But if asking those blunt questions and giving my opinions, and you can say whatever you want to say, I think that's the first step. And I think millennials are willing to ask those hard questions and jump into the conversations to help be a part of the solution, where I think maybe older people are just trying to play it safe and say, this is your point, this is my point. I don't, like, hands off, we'll figure it out, where millennials are not afraid of that conflict or being blunt or asking those questions to find solutions.
Mr. Garvin, Mr. King mentality, I know you've been waiting patiently. I don't know what point you came in on, but I know I'm looking at some of the comments in the sidebar, and it says we've been making a lot of good points, but haven't really approached any solutions. And B-More, I see you have, responded to some of that commentary. So what are your thoughts, King mentality, on solutions? Okay, we know that it exists, right? We know that we need to do a better job to strengthen race relations. And you're a millennial as well. So we're holding you and Jenna personally responsible for getting us on the right track as a society. So what are some ways that we can approach this with some smart action steps to provide some solutions to strengthening race relations in this country?
Well, I definitely think, kind of going back to the conversation that we had last week, this time, when it came to inclusion, one of my biggest things is that you can have this conversation, but when it comes to inclusion, you have to have inclusion in order for there to be diversity. And inclusion is just not saying hiring, but inclusion is saying have a voice. You have to have that voice behind it. Again, I think earlier when Jenna stated that they would die to have a black male or black female in there. That is true. I mean, of course, being in corporate America, I've seen that as well. So that is true. But it's about, are they dying to have their opinion in there?
Are they going to include them? Getting them in for the diversity box is very different than the inclusion action. That's a great point. You must have went to college.
I did at HBCU. 2 of them.
Which ones?
Central for law school, and my MBA, and I went to St. Augustine's College in Raleigh for undergrad.
Cool.
But yeah, I mean, I think that is the biggest thing. I think because again, we as millennials, like you said, we really live for diversity because we love the difference of cultures, and we love to study a lot more about different cultures, whether it's cultures, religion, backgrounds. We like to know those things about people in general. So if we are able to have that inclusion part into it, I think that from that standpoint, we will be able to embrace diversity on a higher level. It goes back to the Oscars. The conversation is just not about the black and white thing. It's really about the inclusion. We're in the movies, but even if the movie that we're in is nominated, the actor who is the person that's doing the acting to make the movie great is not being nominated. So that's the inclusion part of me being an employee of your movie, and I'm not being identified for it. So yeah, and that goes back to Jenna when you say you saw the skit. That I thought it made sense.
I remember.
The SNL skit.
Yeah, the SNL skit. It was genius. It was pretty funny. I want to see if I can encourage Jason Crocker. Jason's been making some good comments. Jason, you're a millennial business owner from the comments that I've seen. Jason, just type in on the comment section, are you willing to dial in? I want to get you in on the conversation to get your perspective.
I'll step down. He can jump in.
Okay, appreciate that, B. Moore.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, there it is. Wow, you guys, he is a millennial. You see how quick he did that? That is a millennial if I ever saw one.
Dude, this is awesome conversation. I appreciate it, guys. This is good stuff.
No, and I saw your comments, man. You've made some good comments and some good questions. So you are a millennial yourself.
Yep.
Sounds like a business owner. Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, entrepreneur, business owner. I run a photography company.
Okay. So as a millennial business owner, I see is that a Cavs hat? Cleveland? You represent Cleveland?
Cleveland, that's what's up.
Yep. All right, cool. So is it different for millennials in those hiring practices than it is for baby boomers? And I'll let you answer. I have my own thoughts and opinions, but I want to get your take on, are you doing things differently that you think could help promote or strengthen race relations than you believe generations in the past have done? Are you, I mean, look, this is open and honest dialogue, and, we all have our biases.
Yeah.
Do you think you're screening the Jamals of the world and the Takishas of the world?
Yeah. So that specifically is really interesting. I definitely think there's some subconscious with generations before ours, some subconscious biases that allow that to happen. I don't know if it's consciously saying, "Oh, Malik's definitely not getting an interview," but when I'm looking for help, or whether it's writing or actually shooting or whatever, I'm literally looking at the work. And I don't actually even look at education, just because for what I do, education doesn't really even matter as well. That's a whole nother conversation, but I'm looking at quality of work. I look at like responsiveness, how people interact with people, and all that stuff. It doesn't gender, race, age, size, shape, none of that matters, for me at least, when I'm looking at that stuff. So I feel like it's two completely different games. Like previous generation, corporate America is one thing, but like I'm in a creative field, so it's definitely a little bit different.
Right.
And being a millennial and a creative and like an entrepreneur starter, like I'm a huge like F the world type of person anyway. So like I always challenge like the status quo. So there's definitely a mindset shift, I think. So when you guys were talking about it being harder to get a job, I think that's definitely still true, but it's not because.
Hello. Hey, Jason, call back in. Something happened, Jason. Call back in. Yeah, Jason, call back in. We lost you somehow. And there he is.
Blab didn't like my 2 cents.
Okay, there you go. And DG, I know you probably have so much more to say, but if I could get you to jump off for a second, I want to let young lady, I'm looking for her name, Shady.
Yeah, I hope I said.
Yeah, I want to let her chime in real quick, and then I'm going to get you back in after I let her chime in. Is that cool, David?
Oh, no problem.
All right, so I'm going to let her comment. So I'm going to lock you out and let her jump in. But I'm sorry, Jason. So let me ask you this, and I know you were in a train of thought, but let me ask you this. What advantages, if any, do you think millennials have than baby boomers or maybe Gen Xers had in strengthening race relations? Do you think millennials have an advantage in being able to strengthen race relations where older generations weren't able to do such a great job of that?
I honestly think that it's somewhat ignorance that is our advantage. We didn't live what generations before us lived, and so we only know what we hear. And if we're kind of like, if I lived what my grandpa lived, I might have a totally different view. But because I didn't, because I went to elementary, middle, high school, where I was actually the minority. There were less whites in my schools than there were blacks, because of the way that I was brought up and the ignorance to the racism that was in previous generations. I think that's helped me be as accepting or clueless, however you want to phrase it. So I think as the generations get further and further away, just like somebody brought up the Holocaust earlier, like it's almost people like a lot of times forget about it. They don't think about it just because they didn't experience it. They didn't live through it.
Right. No, that's a good point. Jenna, you have any comments on your fellow millennials commentary and perspective in that it's, the not having gone through it, the ignorance of those experiences and events actually help better equip and prepare the millennial generation to be champions of diversity and to effectively incorporate climates of inclusion?
I mean, I think I partially agree with that, and I think that probably definitely has an impact on it, but maybe even more so. And I feel like I'm always picking the opposite side of what people say, but I think Jason.
No, I love it. I love it.
Some valid points with that, but I think the other part is we want to be the good guys. We want to be the hero generation. We want to be the ones that make things better. So we saw all the backlash and negative things that our country and the world are saying. We don't want that separation anymore. We don't want all this negative stuff with having different cultures. We want to bring everyone together. So we're trying to avoid the bad and go towards more positive. So we saw the negative backlash. What can we do to live up to what you, True, and maybe some of the country and world things we can do and make everything better and be part of that solution? So we're avoiding the bad, going towards the good, and maybe some of that naivety also helps with that. But I think it's just really, truly from a genuine place of ourselves wanting to make things better, wanting to find solutions.
Totally agree. And being in Cleveland, Cleveland right now racially is a tumultuous place with some of the shootings that have been going on, cop-related shootings. Same thing like you were talking about in Wisconsin, Jenna. So, it's definitely stressful sometimes. So, being young and wanting to fix that. I think we're also a very arrogant generation, and we feel that we can. And I think that's a good thing. I think that mentality will help us hopefully get there, like you said, True.
Hey, Jason, the people who think that they can are the ones who will. You got to start somewhere.
Absolutely.
Man.
I'm as arrogant as they get from the millennial generation.
Hey, Jason, thank you so much for your comments, man. I really appreciate that. Okay, so I want to give, and I'm running over, but this is so good that I will take this opportunity to go over a few minutes on this session, and I want to allow my new friend, Sade. I want to allow my new friend Sade to join in. And Sade, just tell us who you are, where you're from. Are you a millennial? Do you represent the millennial generation? I am a millennial. All right, so tell us a little, who are you, where you from, and we know you represent the millennial generation, and then please share your comments.
I don't know if I represent the sentiment of what's been discussed on this, but I'll try my best because I definitely have to give some context. My name is Sade Wayadu. I am a personal brand strategist, a speaker, and a coach, and I do have an online business. In addition to that, I spend most of my time in the library because I'm also a doctoral student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Hey.
So,
wow. Do you guys know each other?
Props.
Well, welcome. Now we do.
Yeah, we got to meet up.
I don't, well, we'll talk a little bit about that too. I don't really go outside in Wisconsin. In addition to that, and multicultural education and diversity. Multicultural education is some of the things that I am passionate about, in addition to building my brand and business online, is diversity. And prior to moving to Wisconsin, I lived in the Republic of Kazakhstan for 3 years. I taught and trained teachers overseas. Prior to that, I was a student at the University of Pennsylvania. So I lived in Philly. And then prior to that, I went to the historically Black college, Morgan State University. So I've had—
Oh, be more stand up.
Be more in the house. Yeah, I'm more of a be more girl. I'm a Jersey girl. I'm originally from New Jersey. So I'm a Jersey girl. But like my second, third, fourth home is definitely the DMV. So I needed to give that context to kind of understand a little bit about my background and where I come from. I thought living overseas was rough until I moved to Wisconsin. I didn't realize. I was like, what in the world? I grew up in predominantly Black cities. Even when I went to Penn, it's still a predominantly Black city. And living on the East Coast, the context of race relations on the East Coast is entirely different than living in the very not diverse Midwest. And although I live in a liberal city, Madison, Wisconsin is, like I put in the comments, is the worst state for Black children. So the experience of being African-American in Madison, Wisconsin is really a problem. And I know you talked about a little bit about Tony Robinson. I went to his funeral. I was protesting down the street when he was shot in cold blood at his home. I saw the kids at his funeral crying, his mother, his grandmother. I was there. I'm not even from this area. And I felt connected to that story. As a former educator, I taught high school and middle school. That could have been one of my students in Philly. That could have been one of my students. I felt definitely resonated. As soon as I got back to the US and moved to Wisconsin, we had relations in St. Louis, Mike Brown. We're having just racial unrest as soon as I leave to come back into the US. So every single month, it's like, especially being in Madison, because we're so liberal, we have protests all the time. You know, the school, the campus is right here. The state building is right there. There's a protest every other day about something.
Sure is.
So my entire doctoral experience started off in August with protests, started off in December with more protests, being called names left and right. And it was his fault. It was his fault. And these things are happening. And understanding, coming to Wisconsin as someone who is a teacher, educator, and an educator, although I brand myself as an online entrepreneur, I still am an educator and I work with students all the time. Coming to Wisconsin was like the hardest thing that I've had to deal with in a long time. And I lived in a union for 3 years. And sometimes I didn't have water. You know, Flint not having brown water.
That's saying
we didn't have water for months. I lived by the secret police. Like the secret police that people talk about in Russia, I call them the not so secret police because I lived right next door to them for several years. They had all my information and it could get real really quickly. And when Russia was going into Crimea, that wasn't as bad as moving to Wisconsin as a person of color. I always felt uneasy.
Well, let me ask you this. And that's a harsh I got to tell you, I know I am going to be heading to Wisconsin soon, and so, but I will make sure I'm properly prepared. But
it's rough.
What is the solution, Sade? I mean, because you're there and you're taking some action steps. You seem like someone who is very involved, very engaged. You want to impact change and make a difference.
Absolutely.
Look, this is the deal. You're a millennial. You guys got next. You guys,
absolutely.
you guys have been handed the keys to the car.
I want us to not act like
and you and Jenna together though. You and Jenna together are going to have to do this together. How do you guys do this together?
So 2 things I'll say. I want us to stop acting like we're the millennials and everything is diverse and everything is peaches and cream. This article that came out of Huffington Post that said racism is dead, we need to acknowledge that it still exists. That is one of the things. The millennial generation is in denial. And it's not just the millennial. I think I'm going to be honest. When they're talking about millennials, they're not talking about Black millennials because we have these conversations all of the time. They're talking about the white millennial population and diversity and racism is dead. It's not. I deal with it every single day being a Black student on this campus who people think, oh, you got in because you're Black, when it's negative 0.000 of African Americans on this campus out of 40, 50,000 students. So one of the things is we have to not act like it's not an issue because it is. But I do agree with being a part of the solution. So one of the things that I have stepped up to the plate, even though I'm trying to get out of Wisconsin as fast as possible, but I'm stepping up to the plate because I need to be a part of the solution. One of the things that I am participating in on Sunday is a discussion to develop a curriculum for police officers in this city, on this campus, a sensitivities training so that they can go through and understand what people of color and students of color are enduring when we're singled out on the campus. And what the relationship needs to be even with the community. So that's one of the things that I am doing here.
Sade. Connect. I'm doing that here in Cary, North Carolina, where I live. I'm doing exactly that.
Oh, you're from Cary. I got family in North Carolina. Awesome.
Okay, so connect with me offline and I can talk to you about some of and we've had some really great successes with initiatives that we're doing. It's a Building Bridges program for exactly what you just articulated.
Awesome. So, I don't want to sound angry. I am really nice, but this is like a hot button issue to me.
No.
I'm really on social media. I'm like the energy girl.
Well, you know what I'm excited about, right? What this Blab has done, and I'm going to speak this into existence, is that you and Jenna are going to come together and impact some major change in Madison. Like, that's what's exciting me about this. Because I know you both are solutions oriented. You both, and this is the thing, right? We all want the same thing. You want the same thing Jenna wants. Jenna wants the same thing. We all want the same thing. We have different experiences. We have diverse experiences that have led us to this place where we are and having the worldview that we have. But if we do not share that worldview with one another and have the comfort, courage, and confidence to say, this is how I feel, but this is why I feel the way that I feel. Help me move forward and hold me accountable for being respectful and appropriate and inclusive, as David shared, from both parties, and from all parties. I don't even want to say both, from all parties involved. Because it's also a generational thing, then I believe we will be able to make some progress.
So Jenna, let me say something to you quick. So obviously you're killing it. You're doing awesome stuff. You're educated on the topic. You are passionate about the topic. You can't say Wisconsin sucks at this. I'm getting out. That's like the problem.
I can't stay. I know that. I can't. I need to be happy with my life, and my quality of life needs to be happy. So I know for me, my research, as soon as I finish coursework, I'm out. I know that.
I hear you.
So and I need people who are here to continue the work.
We need some people like you to stay and help move this forward. If everyone like you that can help make an impact and is educated and awesome and willing to I understand you want to make things awesome for you, but if everyone like you says that and peace is out of here, like, of course we're going to stay right in what
my advisor has been in Wisconsin for 23 years doing some of this work. And there are definitely, like you said, young, Black, and gifted. They are doing some amazing work in Madison. I have no doubt there is a highly educated Black population in Madison. So I'm not worried about Madison, but I know my heart is in New Jersey. I need to go back to the communities where my roots are. So, and where I feel like I'm going to be the most happiest too. But these issues happen everywhere. So,
well, you're not gonna. You tell me you won't leave until you and Jenna have a cup of coffee, and I'll
but
pay
I will
for
be
it.
out. I leave once a month because I need my sanity. So I'll be in Atlanta next week. So I leave once a month because I need my sanity. So as long as it's not
Click the little
week.
follow button. Click the little follow button.
I'm telling you, I'm really bad with going out in Wisconsin because I just prefer to be in other places. I'm being quite honest. But I am, because of the commitment I do have to people, I did say I am going to be on this task force to work with the police officers. I did make that commitment.
Okay. And well, look, here it is. We are already over time. So I want to thank everybody. Sade, I want to thank you. I want a big shout out to my man Chris Broussard for coming in early with his comments. Jenna, huge thank you. And Jenna,
thank you,
and
Jenna.
I are going to talk because I'm having you back as my special guest, Jenna, having you back. And we will have a new topic to discuss. But this was a very healthy,
this is a hot button topic.
Healthy, rich, and fiery topic. Before I offer my Millennials Revealed recap on this subject, I will give each of you an opportunity to say some kind of a parting commentary on. You have the opportunity to share with your fellow generation members of things that you wish, hope, and pray that they would consider doing to help strengthen race relations in America. So, Sade, I'll start with you.
I'm going to keep it simple and cheerful. Be a voice for good. Be a voice for good.
Okay, that was very, very, very simple and very cheerful.
I like it.
Yeah.
I think for me, something kind of I already said is don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to jump into the dialogue and be a part of the solution. I mean, I think everyone is so sensitive about things now. You're going to piss people off no matter what you do. So if you know that you're coming from the right place, you're trying to go towards what's good, find solutions for things, make things better. Like dive in, ask questions, and people will see that you're coming from the right place. So jump in, be a part of a conversation like this or whatever you think it takes to help move things forward.
Okay.
Yeah, this was great.
No, this was awesome for me. And I learned a lot.
Are you familiar with Sister Scholar, Dr. Avis DeWeaver Jones? These are some of the things she talks about too. She may be someone you may want to reach out to have a blab with too. She's really awesome.
Well, you and I are going to connect, so you'll put me in touch with her.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's she's a commentator for the Roland Martin Show, so she talks about some of these things too.
Okay, got you. No, absolutely. Well, look, my take on this is that it is about starting with the dialogue, but it can't stop there, and having meaningful and intentional dialogue, but being open to truly hear and receive what the other party has to say. You know, and not so caught up in thinking about what you're going to say next that you're not even really absorbing and listening, but really take time to hear the perspective, because that's that person's reality. That's that person's truth, and truly embrace and open yourself up to that, and then focus on, okay, so now how do we move forward? But one of my big things is purpose. And anybody who knows me knows that. It's about getting in alignment with your assignment. We all have our individual purpose, and I am convinced that the millennial generation has a generational purpose that will be accomplished together and collectively. It's a collective generational purpose. And it's because of the diverse and unique backgrounds and experiences that each and every representative of this diverse, multifaceted generation has. It's going to fuel the strength of this generation to accomplish that. So by getting in alignment with your assignment, it's about staying true to your gifts and your passions and being willing to provide a service to deliver against that common goal and that purpose of saving the world. And by understanding that none of us can do this alone, and none of us are expected to do this alone, but we can't sit in a corner as Black Americans and come up with solutions that require the rest of the world to be a party of that solution. We can't sit in a corner as white Americans and come up with a solution that we think is best without including the other members that are going to need to be participatory in that solution. This has to be something that is a collective effort that people come together to say, hey, we all want the same thing. These are the gifts and talents that I bring to the table. These are the things that I'm passionate about. Hey, here I am, let's do this thing together. So that's my take on this. And it's that we all want the same things. It's just a matter of having the hard conversations and dealing with the discomfort that comes with the hard conversations to get past that and then be able to focus on solutions and have a plan in place. Nothing great ever gets accomplished in the comfort zone. All right. Hey guys, thank you all so much for participating in the Millennials Reveal Blab. Sade, you and I will be in touch. Jenna, you and I will definitely be in touch. I'm having you back as my special guest in the next 2 weeks.
All right, sounds good.
And awesome. I'll be coming out to Wisconsin soon.
Hey, right? don't listen to Sade. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. You'll be all right. Me and Sade are gonna be out for a beer down the street. We're gonna call you up. You have to come over.
I'll meet you guys at the local pub.
That's right.
And thank you for all of the guests who have chimed in and signed in and offered their comments. Big shout out to my man Jason. Big shout out to Peeps. Big shout out to B More. Big shout out to King Mentality, to my man David. Everybody that chimed in and offered comments. Rev, I saw you in the building. Lugene, I saw you representing. Meek, Wifey, always love my man Benji. And any and everybody that I missed, thank you all. Every time, same time, every day. I mean, not every day, every week. Mondays at 8:30. See you guys same time next week.
Awesome. All right. Have a great night.
Nice to meet you, Sade.
Have a good night, everybody. Love. Thanks, Jenna.
Yep, you bet. True. See ya.
Okay.